Hi everyone. My name is Phil Valentine, and but for the grace of God, I have not had a drink or a drug since December 28, 1987. It's great that I can come up here and people clap for that. My sponsor always says, don't pat yourself on the back for what people have been doing all their lives anyway. So I have the distinct privilege of following Bill White, so thank you very much, Planning Committee. So I wasn't nervous before, but that is just such powerful stuff, and I have about 13 minutes, but I do have to say, in my own personal recovery, I never had the luxury of going to through the treatment system. I got recovery outside the formal treatment system. And you talked about that 5-year mark. I was complaining early on in recovery, and my sponsor, God bless him, said, Phil, it's going to take you 5 years to straighten out your spaghetti. And I was like, okay. So I put that in my head. 5 years came along. I said, my spaghetti is now straightened. You know what he said to me? Well, it's going to take another 5 years to put it in the box, back in the box. I'm just, okay. So I'm trying to hear, maybe my spaghetti straightened and in its box. I don't know. But what I'm here to do is talk about the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, a recovery community organization that's been established since roughly late 1998. And we've had excellent support from our single state agency, from the recovery community of Connecticut, and from the federal government, original RCSP grantee. And so we've had some resources, and we've had a lot of passion and drive, and I'm going to kind of give you a snapshot of where we are now, so you can kind of see where we've grown to, and see how that fits in with the research agenda and within your states and that kind of thing. Make sense? Yep. Now, one of the first things I wanted to show you is this historical context, and this is from Bill, but many years ago, when the recovery community couldn't handle that real severe case, the treatment community was called in, like somebody was a medical detox, that kind of thing. And so treatment was just a part of the recovery community. And when we talk about this could be almost as a simplified version of the recovery-oriented system of care. And when we talk about that whole phrase, we talk about defining recovery, the orientation of the treatment or the system. We talk about different systems. But to me, the most important word in there is care. And how you define care. And to me, there's a step 3, the care of God. But we're often talking about the care of other individuals. In technical terms, it could be that thing called therapeutic alliance. And to me, do we speak about love? And do we dare speak about caring and actually loving the people we work with and care about their lives and want to see them healthy and restored? And that, for me, is the real blessing of what 12-step fellowships have, other forms of recovery support, about what happens every day in the Recovery Community Center when somebody walks in. One of the greatest testament to our Recovery Community Center is somebody was lost and looking for it. And they were asking the neighborhood in Hartford, and there's a lot of activity in this neighborhood. There's shelters, there's halfway houses, there's all kinds of things. And this woman said, well, I'm looking for a C-car. And they go, the shelter? No, it's not the shelter. And this guy in the neighborhood said, oh, you mean the recovery place. And so that, to me, was like, wow, the neighbors think of us as the recovery place, a place to find recovery. Anyway, I digress. Let me move along. I got about 8 minutes left, so here we go. So now, like Bill was just talking about, there seems to be a divorce between, or a gap at least, between the treatment community and the long-standing recovery community. And recovery community organizations and other institutions are now starting to work just to bridge that gap. And if you look at a bridge goes 2 ways. The bridge is asking for the treatment to come reach out into the community, but also as a member of the recovery community, but also as a long-standing member now of the recovery community, I feel we have an obligation to impact the treatment system as well. So that bridge is a 2-way street. That also works for single state agencies that are running this. I think they also need to have that bridge to the recovery community as well. So we do 2 things. We've organized the recovery community to do two things. Put a face in recovery. That's the advocacy piece, the big A. And the more I hear and listen about research, America needs the entire infusion of hope that recovery and long-term recovery brings. And so things like Faces and Voices of Recovery that are putting the faces of recovery and the voice of recovery into all aspects of our society still needs to be there. We need to see the living proof that recovery is real. And we also do the second thing, which is to provide recovery support services or peer-based recovery support services. Some of our advocacy highlights: we wrote recovery core values early on with the state. We turned Heroin Town, a negative newspaper article, into Recovery Town. That was where our first recovery community center was. It went from church basements onto Main Street. So you can go down Main Street in Willimantic and see a sign that here's a recovery community center. We talk about pardons process and some other things. I have to move along here. We do a lot of our putting a face on recovery, cable TV shows, DVDs, website, the recovery walks. And I want to talk a little bit about recovery community centers, because I see them as a real integral part in this whole recovery-oriented system of care. Recovery-oriented sanctuaries are anchored in the heart of the community. One of the wonderful things about a recovery community center is that it brings in all forms of recovery: 12-step, medication-assisted, faith-based, dual diagnosis. But we never focus on the pathology of the individual. We focus on the recovery potential. For example, I serve on the co-occurring disorders steering committee for the state. And they had this thing where they wanted people to come speak. And so we posted this flyer in the center. Long-time volunteers said, oh, I have co-occurring disorder, and I'd like to go speak at that. We didn't know. We had no idea, because we don't ask. If they're there to work on their recovery, to volunteer, to give back, and that's what happens when you focus on recovery as the outcome. Our recovery centers are located in 4 areas across the state: Willimantic, New London, Bridgeport, and Hartford. This is our kind of menu of recovery support services offered out of each of the centers. An all-recovery group is an interesting phenomenon. My own personal bias was that I come from a 12-step background. These would never work. Boy, was I wrong. Who would want to go to this? Well, in Willimantic, for example, at 12:30, middle of the day meeting, there's 40 to 60 people each and every day. And they pick a recovery topic like humility, honesty, willingness, or something along those lines. They talk about it, they close with a positive affirmation. Just been a wonderful, wonderful experience. We do recovery training. We have family nights now in each of the center, family support groups. We're doing recovery coaching. We just started our first cohort of our Recovery Coaching Academy. I want to talk, we do a variety of recovery social events, telephone recovery support. We'll get into more in the Recovery Housing Project. We'll talk about that 90-day follow-up. Well, this was out of the, actually, Mark Godley came out and talked to us. We ran a pilot. We call a person once a week for 12 weeks to check in on their recovery. We ran that pilot. And we found that it was incredibly successful. The state has since funded us to reach 2,500 recoveries each and every year. A recovery with an EE on the end, like an employee, a refugee. We often like to kind of talk about, what do we call these people? Are they clients, patients, consumers? And we decided that we'll call them recoverees. And so it helps the recovery, and it helps the person receiving the call as well. I'll just put these quotes up, but recently at our volunteer recognition banquet, we had this guy, and his volunteer's name, no kidding, was James Earl Jones, and he came up and he spoke about making a call, and this person had just got out of treatment, was actively intoxicated. They had some trouble on this phone call. James said he'd call him back in a few minutes when he finished his rest of his calls. He called the guy back. The guy was so moved. He told them that he had just taken a whole month of medication. They called 911. Long story short, they saved the guy's life. They had a tearful reunion, all because of that reach out phone call. When he shared this, James Earl Jones, the night of that phone call, his engagement had just broken off. He was distraught. And so not only was this guy's life saved, he was emotionally returned to some state of health as well, too. And just incredible how that win-win situation. a couple other quotes. You know, Curtis talks about how that he's in recovery. This is the perfect way of giving back, being the phone call that he never got. We have now called people, and there's one more slide at the end, for more than 2 years. And because it's not broken, we don't fix it. So if they want their calls after the 12 weeks, we keep calling. And we currently have more than close to 400 people we're calling out of the 4 centers each and every week. The Recovery Housing Project, we heard some about the independently owned, privately operated sober houses. We just inventoried that and put it on the website. And now we're going to have a website where people can search for where the house is, the type of house it is, what forms of payment, all that kind of thing. So that's been a real helpful for the treatment industry as well in our state. The key to this is our volunteer management system. In 2006, we implemented this about 2005. We had, in 2006, about 200 volunteers gave us 5,000 hours of service. In 2007, we had 300 volunteers gave us more than 10,000 hours of service. It's starting to become the culture, and it's starting to become that this is a way of giving back. People in long-term recovery see a new way to give back. And we modeled it after a hospital volunteer system so that it has a lot of professionalism and integrity. People feel like they're valued when they come in and serve with us. So that's kind of the overview of that. And the reason we do that is because we have a very small staff. I don't know if any of you can relate to that. So if we can multiply to our volunteers, in turn, they can have that ripple effect outwards and in turn engage many, many more people than a small staff can do. So as far as CCAR is concerned, we're always going to, or at least I shouldn't say always, but right now it's very much a volunteer culture, and we really feel strongly about maintaining that volunteer culture. Does CCAR make a difference? Last 2 slides. 15,000 people walked into our 4 recovery centers in 2007. That's 10,000 hours of service from our volunteers. Our volunteers made over 7,400 outbound calls in 2007. First quarter of 2008, we've made over 8,000 outbound phone calls just in the first 3 months of this year. So we're on a pace to getting 24,000 to 25,000 outbound calls. CCAR fielded more than 1,500 requests for recovery housing beds. We held 70 trainings for about 500 plus participants. And then the numbers from the GIPRA data over the last 3 years, this is when they come in and after 6 months, you can see that these are either volunteers, people that have been involved with us, but if they get active with us, 92% stay alcohol and drug free, addressing legal issues, jobs, went back to school, safe and affordable housing, reconnecting with families and friends. So we think we're having a very positive effect through this one thing, and these are the kinds of things that research needs to look at more. These are our data from, but I don't know if it's clinically based or clinical trial. I don't know all that stuff. I just know that we have to take some data from the beds and just keep it useful, right, Dr. Clark? So Dr. Clark likes this stuff. And so, but it helps us present that to our legislators, and we hope to fund an entire network of recovery community centers in Connecticut. This is our contact information, so that's it for that. Do I have to do Tom? Do I have to be Tom Kirk? I can't really be Tom Kirk, just to say that he's incredibly supportive of a recovery-oriented system of care. The leadership from the top, and one of the things that he would say is that as a single state agency director, the lifespan of most of these guys or ladies is about, what, 18 months? And he's had the fortune of being there 10, 11, 12 years now. And he's had that chance to really implement these systems, and I think that's key, that we have to really look at the leadership and keeping them in place. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Thank you, John.